He didn't rise to power through charisma. He wasn't known for grand speeches or political cunning. He was quiet, measured, even reluctant. And yet George Washington became one of the most powerful figures in human history. Not because he wanted power, but because he understood when to let it go. This is the story of the first American president, the general who led a revolution, the man who could have been king, but instead gave the world an example of restraint, dignity, and republic. George Washington was born in 1732 in the British colony of Virginia. He wasn't born into aristocracy or destined for fame. He grew up as the son of a moderately wealthy planter and lost his father at age 11. The loss shaped him deeply, forcing him into early independence. Without the connections or formal education that many of his peers had, Washington carved his path with discipline, personal resolve, and a relentless sense of responsibility. As a teenager, he worked as a land surveyor. This job, often in the rugged wilderness, gave him more than income. It gave him self-reliance, a connection to the land, and an appreciation for how vast and vulnerable the colonies were. That experience hardened him. It also taught him how to navigate leadership quietly, not through words, but through presence. In his 20s, he was drawn into the French and Indian War. He was young, unproven, and eager, a dangerous mix. He made critical mistakes early on, including a disastrous defeat at Fort Necessity. But what set Washington apart wasn't how he avoided failure, but how he responded to it. He learned, he adapted, and slowly a reputation formed. Brave under fire, calm in crisis, and always focused on the long game. After the war, he married Martha Custis, a wealthy widow, and became the master of Mount Vernon. A large plantation along the Potomac River, he embraced the life of a Virginia gentleman. Farming, hosting, managing business, but his mind was never far from the growing unease between the American colonies and the British Crown. When the British began imposing taxes and laws that undermined colonial self-rule, Washington grew increasingly uneasy. He wasn't a radical, he wasn't loud, but he was deeply committed to justice and autonomy. And when the colonies moved toward resistance, Washington became a symbol of unity. A Southern landowner who stood with the Northern agitators, a man of stature willing to risk everything. In 1775, with war breaking out, the Continental Congress named George Washington Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. It was a desperate appointment. The army was undertrained, underfunded, and completely unprepared to face the British. Washington inherited chaos, but he brought order. His leadership style was unconventional for the time. He didn't inspire with passion. He inspired with endurance. He lived among the troops, accepted blame when things went wrong, and never demanded loyalty. He earned it. He lost more battles than he won. But he understood something few did. Survival was the true victory. During the winter of 1777 to 1778, at Valley Forge, Washington and his troops suffered through freezing temperatures, disease, and starvation. Many thought the revolution was finished, but Washington remained. That winter became his crucible. Out of it, a real army emerged. Not just soldiers, but patriots bound together by shared sacrifice. Through alliances with the French, strategic retreats, and calculated risks, Washington held the revolution together. In 1781, the war turned with the victory at Yorktown, where British forces surrendered. Independence was won. The world had witnessed something rare, a group of colonies defeating an empire. And now, the real test began. At the end of the war, Washington could have taken full control. His soldiers were loyal, Congress was weak. The nation was new and fragile, but Washington shocked the world. He resigned his military commission and returned to private life. Voluntarily. No general had done that before. His resignation became one of the most powerful moments in political history. Even King George III, upon hearing it, reportedly said, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." But peace didn't last. The Articles of Confederation, the country's first governing framework, left the government powerless. States bickered, debt soared, and instability spread. In 1787, leaders begged Washington to return, not as general, but as a steady hand to guide the creation of a new constitution. He presided over the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. Though he spoke little, his presence anchored the debate. His silence wasn't weakness, it was intentional. People listened when he finally did speak, because they knew he never spoke without reason. In 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected the first president of the United States. There was no campaign, no vote counting. Everyone agreed, if America was to survive, Washington had to lead. As president, he had to invent everything. There were no traditions, no models. Every decision was precedent. He chose to be called Mr. President, rejecting royal or noble titles. He chose to create a cabinet made up of men who disagreed with him because he believed ideas should be tested, not protected. His 2 terms were marked by enormous challenges, dealt with rebellions, economic crises, foreign threats, and the rise of bitter political factions. Some wanted the United States to become more like Britain, with strong central authority. Others demanded states' rights above all. Washington stood between them, not always perfectly, but always with balance. He kept the young nation out of European wars, promoted neutrality over entanglement, and he understood what few of his time did, that democracy is fragile, and it must be protected by example. Perhaps the most courageous decision of his presidency came not during war, but at its end. After 8 years in office, Washington refused a 3rd term. There was no law requiring him to step down, but he knew power must not become a habit. So he left, peacefully, purposefully, and in doing so, he showed the world how a republic should function. His farewell address still studied today, warned of the very dangers we continue to face. Excessive partisanship, entangling foreign alliances, and the erosion of national unity. He didn't write it as a warning for his time. He wrote it for ours. George Washington died in 1799. He was 67. The country mourned him not with parades, but with silence. His flags were lowered, bells tolled, and even Britain, his former enemy, paid tribute. But Washington's legacy cannot be contained in monuments or currency. It's not in marble statues or national holidays. It's in the quiet strength of institutions, in the peaceful transfer of power, in the idea that leaders serve and then step aside. He was not perfect. He owned enslaved people, a fact that history must never ignore. His silence on slavery during his presidency haunts his otherwise towering example. And yet within that contradiction we see the tension of the founding ideals unfulfilled, yet still pursued. Washington's greatness does not lie in his victories. It lies in his restraint. In the moments when he could have chosen power and instead chose principle, he didn't just fight a revolution, he defined one. He didn't just lead a country, he showed it how to exist. And perhaps, above all, he didn't just serve as the first president. He taught everyone who followed what it means to truly lead.